Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Madeleine.
Hi there, Rob. Thank you for inviting me. It's lovely to be here with you.
Well, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Well, where do I start? Fundamentally now I call myself a storyteller. And I'm 50, and it took me quite a while to get to that point. And I realized that's what I'm passionate about, and that's what I actually do. So the most obvious reason I'm a storyteller is because I've brought out my debut novel, Mother of Floods, which I wrote 2017. It took me a year, and that was published by US-Canadian publisher Crow's Nest in April this year in the midst of lockdown. So I suppose that's my obvious credential for storytelling. But in terms of going back a little bit, I publish magazines, and I'm really passionate about helping people speak and find their voice, and creating vehicles that do that, say from websites to magazines. And I work with a lot of different organizations. Once upon a time I called myself a marketing specialist, but now I quite like storyteller. Madeleine White, #storyteller.
I've been known to spin a couple of yarns myself, but when I started kind of like, because I'm really good at reading, but I really hate to read. ADHD, it will not let me take the ability to be able to kind of take a word off a piece of paper without my brain thinking of a million different things. And what I started to notice, kind of even through doing the podcast, is conversations are stories. We're all a history book. We're all writing a tale each and every day. And that's where I'm like, it's amazing. And I didn't truly understand that, because I mean, when I was in high school, it was like, I don't care about that. I want to play video games. I want to skate. I want to do all these other types of things. And then government class I had, they made me do service learning, where you would have to do like something, volunteer hours or something. And I went to a nursing home, and I was meeting like Holocaust survivors. I was meeting like all these types of things where I was like, whoa, like you've lived a life. And I've just like, my biggest fear right now is if I'm going to have taquitos or Hot Pockets when I get home. And you're talking about like what you're going through. And I'm like, everyone's got a story. So if you're fancying yourself as a storyteller, can you tell me a good story?
Well, I suppose I've probably got several stories in me, as most of us do. But I think, in the end, a good story comes from, I think, you have imagination, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. But actually, most imagination is linked to something deep inside you. And that something deep inside you, we all have this authentic core, this spirit, this soul, whatever you want to call it, this who we are. And our experiences, I think, help create that and help make that happen. And so, I suppose in terms of a happy story, I can tell you something recently, how I came to write Mother of Floods, because I think that really illustrates kind of who I am and what I've come to believe in. So I was working as an international development consultant. I worked kind of all over Africa. I worked in Iraq. I worked with technology and kind of basically helping people tell their stories. And I launched Nina magazine, which is one of these up here with the World Bank in 2013. Which opened a lot of doors, and that was all about women, helping women tell their stories. And Zaha Hadid, the famous architect, was one of the people we spoke to. But so were women who would go out, and know when I went to visit Iraq, I spoke to so many women based in Baghdad, but also Erbil and Sulaymaniyah. They're Kurdistan, and Baghdad is obviously the capital of Iraq further down. And they would say to me, when I get up in the morning, I don't know whether I'm going to be coming back to a whole family. They had their children at school, they had the husband who was going somewhere else. And I don't know if we're all going to be sitting at the kitchen table again in the evening. So those were incredibly powerful stories. And, I've had some very difficult things happen in my life as well, which I'm sure we'll touch upon as we progress in our conversation. But I suppose that kind of really touched me. And I thought, well, if they can get through things, if they can deal with this just for today, what does that mean to me? And so eventually I handed the magazine over and back to the local partner in 2016. And then I started working for an organisation in Edinburgh. Now, in the UK, when we say something is 500 miles away, that's really, really, really far. Now, I know in the US, that's not very far.
That's pretty far.
Yeah, well, you know, I know I have friends who kind of drive for absolutely hours. And, you know, it's kind of seen as a hop, skip and a jump. But, you know, I've driven it recently, so it's a 9-hour drive. So it's pretty good going. But I was working, I got a contract in Edinburgh for an organisation that helped with that helped entrepreneurs from different countries who were desperate to connect the kind of products they made, you know, be it pure honey from pure honey from let's say Kenya, and that could be exported to the Western markets, and this kind of really natural, pure produce, be it handmade crafts, all this kind of thing. Anyway, so I had a contract up in Edinburgh, and I was helping these entrepreneurs tell their stories to investment people, so impact investment people, and I was really enjoying the work. The problem was I was traveling all the time. And, you know, and my commute in itself, I was traveling up to Edinburgh 2 or 3 times, generally flying, but I was just absolutely and utterly beat, as you say in the States. I was exhausted. And I have a husband and 3 children. I would say my oldest is 24 and my youngest is 16 now. I just didn't know whether I was coming or going. And I found myself, it just got to a point where I'd got a sty on my eye and I was just beyond, I just wasn't coping anymore. And I just thought, what am I doing? And I'd got a little bit of inheritance, not much, but enough to take a risk and say, okay, I can risk, you know, being without salary for a couple of months, and we'll just see what happens. And so I resigned, but I resigned knowing that I had a couple of potential contracts to go to. One was with the State Department in the US, which was linked to women's kind of women's economic empowerment, and some centers that have been set up, again helping tell stories. And the other one was linked, again it was US based, I can't remember what it was called, but anyway, the point was when Trump came in, he obviously just slashed through so much activity that was linked, or it was USAID, the other one, so much activity that was linked to, you know, supporting women in different centres, and the We Create centres was one of the key things that was kind of slashed fairly immediately. And so I found myself in the January, you know, no income, no work, and just not knowing what to do. And then just a really peculiar set of coincidences, I belong to a self-help group. And one of the guys there said, I've got a horse, I'm really not coping with her, you know, I'm struggling with my own issues. And as a child, I'd absolutely loved riding. I'm part German, and I lived in Germany until I was nearly 11, and we were on the French border. And I rode friends' Icelandic ponies through these magnificent forests. And I touched on riding, you know, ever since, but, you know, I'd never really engaged again. Anyway, long story short, this horse came into my life, and she hadn't been physically neglected, I suppose, but, you know, she'd certainly been neglected in terms of time spent with her, in times of, you know, horses are intelligent creatures. They need a bond with other horses or with humans, and she had neither. And so I started working with her, and basically I started riding her, but I hadn't ridden for years. She hadn't been ridden in years, and I had a really nasty fall and broke my wrist and had a concussion. And it was round about the time I was thinking to myself, okay, I really need to go back to London. I really need to go back. I really need to, you know, I'm frightened. I'm frightened about my material existence. You know, we're maintaining a household. My husband's working, but actually, you know, I'm just frightened about material things. And then when I broke my wrist, it was just somehow, I just thought, sod this. It doesn't matter. What actually matters? What do I really want to connect with? What have I always wanted to do? And actually what I'd always wanted to do was write a book. And I also came to see through my work that very often fiction can be so much more powerful than fact in helping to convey ideas and things that matter. And so I set out to write a book that mattered to me. And hopefully, that like, like authors like Margaret Atwood or like Paulo Coelho, or maybe you might just remember a book called The Celestine Prophecy that wasn't particularly well written, but actually was really incredibly powerful in terms of opening people's minds to the potential of other dimensions and how we can kind of create the reality we want to be. That was late 90s. And so I just thought, based on all the experiences I've had in educational technology, in women's economic empowerment, as a wife, as a mother, my father was a manic depressive, we fled Germany, so an awful lot of things were just stored up in me, and I wanted to create a framework for them. And so I started writing Mother of Floods that April. And it's been the whole thing actually, it's been a real test in resilience. It's been a real test in who I am and how far down I can dig and what I really believe in. And what I believe is this: I believe that stories matter. I believe that we all have the power to create the world we want to see. And I believe in this, which I really do think is the age of the downfall, and I'll come back to that in a bit. But I believe in this age of dystopian reality where the digital world has overtaken what we actually hold to be true in terms of nature, in terms of creative thought, in terms of imagination. And I believe we have the power to bring it back, but only if we work together and only if we believe and move beyond this command and control materialistic world that's been forced upon us
Well,
into a different way of being. And that's
creativity
what
is
I
a
wrote.
well, creativity is a thing that is gonna, and you said a mouthful. I had so many moments I wanted to hop in there and say something because I really was kind of connecting with a lot of the stuff you're talking about. When we say storytellers, everyone has the ability to connect with a story. Everybody has the ability in a certain thing that they're interested in, where they're going to go down this rabbit hole of information and know so much and soak up so much that's really going to resonate with them. For instance, me, um, personal side, when I was growing up through school, education system didn't know a whole lot about what ADHD was. That was seen as an issue, and the best way to handle that issue is to isolate that and put that somewhere else. Eventually trying to convince my parents that I was mentally challenged. No, I just couldn't sit still. I had this era of creativity, this spark of inspiration, and I had read a book that really resonated with me, and it's called Cruise Control. And it's about an older brother who has a mentally challenged brother, and he wanted his brother to die more than anything in the world because he felt like his brother was holding his whole entire family down. You get to hear this kid that's a star basketball player talk about how he's got this brother that he never wants to be around or anything. But then he saw two kids come up with a lighter and light a match under his brother's chin. And his brother's like in a wheelchair and can't really move, and starts, making these noises and starts drooling and trying to get away from the fire because his body's realizing it's hot. And he's sitting there going, yes, let it happen, let it happen. And then eventually he snaps out of it and realizes that's his family. And he goes over and beats up these two kids. Now, hearing that side of the story, then reading the continuing book after that, which was called Inside Me, which was from the brother's perspective, the mentally challenged one. And he's a freaking Stephen Hawking's inside of his head. And I'm like, oh my God, like, realize when I started going to the store that mentally challenged kids that would work there were getting the hardest jobs and getting the stuff that the manual labor stuff that was like, go out there in the snow and go get shopping carts and bring them in. And I'm sitting there like, they have the best thing, which is ignorance is bliss. They're looking at the purest moments and the bare bones of life. Thing that really hit and connected to me. And everyone has something like that, whether it's with social work, whether it's hearing somebody's story and deciding to dig down that road of history. And it's like, there's a difference between listening to a story and connecting with it. There's a job out there called ghostwriters that write stories for people that can't really do it themselves. And that's an amazing job. But a lot of the times those people don't truly feel the belief in it. And that's when someone will go like, I don't feel like you heard my story. And it's because you need to connect, you need to resonate with something, because there's a lot of it. And it does lead into what you were saying about how the world is kind of turning to this technological thing. Creativity used to be a huge thing when we were, at least when I was a kid, staring outside the window and having my imaginary friend run alongside the car. My little nephew doesn't do that. My little nephew plays on a tablet or watches a movie. Imaginary friends don't seem that common anymore. It's like, hold on a second, did we lose the instant creativity? I had a blue gecko, like the thing from Geico, and then I had a giant dragon like the one from Aragon, except it could shapeshift into a person. And they were just my mind going nuts. And I wouldn't, honestly, I forgot about them. But at the same time, I'm remembering them now. They got me through some hard times in school. And you're hearing the Pythagorean theorem, and you're thinking of your imaginary friends outside the classroom waiting for you to go outside and play. And that's where storytelling turns into this form. And you said sometimes fiction is better than fact. A lot of times is having a bit of the truth is good, and it can help enchant a story. But a lot of the times people are looking for an escape, and this is where we're going to see with video games and movies and all these things that people try and isolate themselves to listen to, is we're all looking for that pathway to a new dimension. It's like when you open up a book, you should see the same thing, a gateway into an escape from a little bit of reality, because life right now is really, really tense. And a lot of people really, you can't get that from a Kindle. You can't, swipe in all this type of thing. It doesn't have the same reaction as having a book in hand and flipping that page and actually reading the words and seeing how someone put this there and crafted this in such a way. Well, we only want to read the front page, read the inside panel, and read the ending and get a base justice of what the book's about. Well, it's why authors establish their name in the back of the book sometimes if they're a foreign author, if they're from India, if they're from another country and they're writing a book about physics or something like that. Someone's going to look at the book, that who wrote it? And if they don't see a white guy at the front page or something like that, they immediately just dismiss the book. And I'm like, hang on, read the whole thing and then find out who wrote it. Because even if you love the book, no matter who wrote the thing, you're still going to love the book once you get to the end.
Well, Rob, if you think about it, I mean, look, I'm 50, you're in your 20s, you're in the States, I'm in the UK. I could go on about all the differences. But how did we actually connect? Well, we connected, but we used social media, but we didn't use it as a throwaway tool. I put out something that mattered, and you actually connected, and you thought about it, and you thought, actually, this is someone I would like to speak to. And I honestly believe that if we have the courage to share a bit of our story, to have that bit of authenticity of this is who I am, this is why I am, this is what I do, there will always be something that connects that fundamental humanity in all of us. And then together, there's ways of exploring. Say, for example, you mentioned about your ADHD. I think my father was manic depressive, and not just, slightly bipolar, fashionably bipolar. He was out and out mad. When I was 10, that's why we left Germany. He was on the road in the nude with a broom trying to attack the bus, and this was a government lawyer, so you can imagine. And he is sadly now dead. But I really do think that the power of we don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to be in a box to connect with each other. And I think, increasingly, the more one world, the more globalized we become, the more there's a desire and a push, especially by big corporations, because actually it's all cogs in a wheel, isn't it? To kind of put us all in a box that fits, a box that will go out and buy things, a box that will react in a certain way,
A drone lifestyle.
The algorithm, yeah. And so by you having ADHD, or by my father having manic depression, he always believed, he connected to things in a different way. He always said in the old days he'd have been a medicine man, and this was before we knew that I actually had my mother's side of the family. I've got First Nation roots, Ojibwe Canadian. So it's just so interesting. If we are determined to be homogenous, just be exactly the same all the time, we will never reach our potential. And I think this is one of the huge problems, is that at the moment, everything is pushing, and fear in particular. I mean, at the moment we're dominated by fear because of the COVID situation, because, you know, I'm finding it difficult to watch about the fires in Brazil and all the beached whales, all the awful things that are happening. And fear is pushing us. Well, you know, the big corporations, government says we must all do this, we must all be the same, when actually that's completely contrary to human nature. We're social creatures. Yes, we need to work and operate together, but that doesn't mean we all have to be the same. And so therefore, you know, your ADHD and, you know, some of the stories that you shared, you kindly shared a previous podcast with me before we spoke, and I loved your conversation with Jenna. You know, some of the conversations and some of the stories you shared are so powerful, and they allow people from all over the world to connect with your way of thinking. Now, where your way of thinking might be quite different to my way of thinking around certain things, but the fact that we're able to have an open dialogue around what matters to us, isn't that something just incredibly powerful?
The
And
world, well,
I'm really
it's
excited.
much like you see in our political system in the US. It's kind of like this issue of we surrounded ourselves with people that think and act like us and agree with everything we say, and there's no room for another opinion or another side. And this is where I say you're not being open-minded as a person, is the fact of, yeah, we're a pack society. We're always going to want to be in a group. We're always going to want to form these things. You know, if you want to go down cult route, you want to go down whatever, turning into an Instagram hashtag and talking to a fellow book club people, whatever it is, we want to be around people. And there's times when it becomes too much and we want those days of isolation. And everyone's like, well, I could live by myself like a hermit for a while. Yeah, for like maybe a week or two, and then eventually you're going to be crazy and you're going to be like, I need a hug from somebody. I need to feel that love, that emotion, that empathy. But when we surround ourselves with so many people that think exactly like us and never ever, I guess, contradict us or ask a question or something like that, you're doing yourself a disservice. And it's weird because what I started thinking about is everyone's got this happy place in their head. Everyone's got something of what it is. Is it a dream escape? Is it them lying on a beach? Mine has never been like that. Mine has been my memories. Going back to even some of the hardest stuff in my life, but looking at it from a different angle and a different perspective, not really enchanting myself with the pain, but more like forgiving myself and understanding of what I was looking through at the time. When it comes down to me as a little kid, a lot of my memories are, I'm thinking back, I can remember I walked through my whole entire house as a little kid. I mean, just from memory. And people think, how do you remember that? I'm like, it's there. That's everyone's happy place. Is like they say heaven is just a collection of your memories. You can live in your memories, but don't forget to make new ones, or you'll never have new stuff to process. Me looking back at my old ones is showing a gap where I've completely cut off, where I was an introvert for so long and didn't experience anything new. The world is going to realize that. You say systems falling into a peg. The pandemic opened that up to everybody's eyes, that you were in a freaking system, the system crashed, now you don't know what to do. But then after a little while, it's like a near-death experience. You go back to this drone-like state, and then eventually it's gone again. And then something drastic has to happen again, where there's only a 2-week lull. People talk about, oh, the world's going to be empathy. All this stuff's going to come back. At the first week of COVID, I was like, it's going to last a
Yeah,
few
yeah,
weeks. It's only going to last a few weeks. It's like a near-death experience. On September 15th, I've mentioned this story. It hasn't really came out yet, but I watched a man die. At work, I saw a man have a heart attack and completely die. I didn't know what to do. I freaked out. I ran up and I was trying to figure everything out. And two doctors that were working out at the time that were off work were applying CPR, and they screamed at me to call 911. I immediately hustled and called 911 and gave them directions to get to this place. For the past week now, I've been on this new thing where I'm like looking at life a little bit differently, of how closely you can get out of tune out of it. And it happens because it's so much easier to play it safe and not understand, just to say yes and go and abide. But then that lacks the true creativity that lies inside of you.
yeah. Absolutely. I think, oh, there's so much that you've said that I'd like to unpack. I think that let's actually start with what you just shared about death and about actually seeing that. I mean, I am a Christian, and that's come, over many years of over many years of experimentation
Wait,
with
they brought
different.
him back, by the way. I just want to throw that in there. They brought him back.
Right?
Yeah, they brought him back. He's alive. I saw him the other day. He's doing okay.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. I'm so pleased. So he didn't. So it was a near death. It was a near death event,
No,
and
he
the
died
work.
and the CPR worked and they brought him
Oh,
back, which
yeah.
is freaking rare, they said, but he came back and he's doing an okay recovery. I just saw him the other day. He actually shook my hand and everything. I was like, dude, I'm just happy you're alive, but you're not working out today. That's not happening. Like, there's no way. You got to take a month off or something.
No, that's wonderful. But actually, that kind of illustrates. So, for the purposes of general, I believe that there is a power greater than myself. I absolutely fundamentally believe that, and I also believe that there are different dimensions. There's different dimensions of life and death. There was a wonderful book. It's actually, you can get it on PDF for free now. It was written in the 1920s. And it's called Life in the World Unseen. Now, ostensibly, it was written by a priest who died, and then he was communicating through a medium. But it's the concept of, he was talking about different dimensions, and he was talking about the idea of that the lowest dimension when you die are people who are still really clinging on to life or to things undone, or just really not particularly pleasant spirits. And the further you go away, the further you let go, the more freedom you have, and the more of a kind of heaven it is. And I much prefer that idea to the kind of concept of the kind of Christian heaven and hell, and that kind of, this is black and this is white. And so for me, I think the dimensions, as you say, a kind of near-death experience, there's so many stories about like going into the light. There are so many stories that are so similar. Or people in a coma, and I just think we have that our world, we just don't know enough. We don't know enough about the world we're in, about when you hear a wonderful piece of music, where that takes you, where you see art. There are just so many things we don't know, and I think they're linked to our presence or our absence, or this is just a transition. Our physical life is a transition, and if you follow that through to the end, then that links us into it gives us much greater responsibility in terms of how we husband our planet, in terms of the relationship we have with nature, and in
The
terms of the
energy you give
relationship
off.
we have precisely. And so I feel quite strongly. I mean, my main character in Mother of Floods, I don't want to give too much away, but actually the internet gets a soul, and it's based on Martha, who's I suppose the central character. Her husband dies, and he dies before the book starts. But actually, the evolution of how he turns into the internet soul, and how he uses the kind of digital pathways to stay connected to his family and to help protect, and then he gets further and further and further away till, in the end, there's a much wider being. That's something that I really wanted to play with, that concept of, the world unseen being not just the world of spirit or the world of the digital, but somehow that this world unseen was connected, and that pixelated world and the world of spirit, they weren't separated. They were almost a continuation of each other, and we should use the same kind of rules, I suppose, as we do within some of our world religions, to actually look at navigating the challenges of our digital world as well. So, I found that I think that's quite central to who I am, this belief it doesn't all stop here. There's so many different things and so many other things we can be part of and participate in.
You mentioned the spirit, and what's interesting is I heard a neurosurgeon, at least from a comedian's kind of storytelling in a way. He was talking about how he had talked to his doctor, a neurosurgeon, who was talking about that. He was explaining that he does think that the body has a spirit because he can replace anything, your brain, whatever, you can do whatever. But you can't, there's something like if you put a brain into another body, it's the same person, but it's not truly the same person. There's something else that there can't be transferred. There's something in there that is like that. And you start to look at the world and how emotionalists from media, all these types of things, we're kind of becoming numb a little bit. Starts to kind of enter like you're looking at a husk. There's no light behind the eyes, I would say. And it's really, really concerning to me, mostly because I believe that a lot of the issues that we have all come from a lack of empathy. And you start seeing with the riots and stuff is that people are really trying to show the empathy and show they care. That's not the empathy that needs to be out there. It needs to be as simple as just saying a hello and actually meaning it, having that, how are you doing today? I've had it happen recently. Someone asked me how I'm doing today. I'm like, honestly, not that good. Oh, that's awesome. And then they would just walk away. And I'm like, you did not hear what I said.
No, I
And
didn't want to hear
yeah,
that.
and
Fine.
there is so much negative that goes on in the world, but there's a lot more positive. But we need to find a way to be able to express that a little bit more, so we're not just creating this mindless drone system of 9 to 5 workers that are just emotionless and they just want to come home and sleep because the day was so draining and so long. You wouldn't need self-care if we could learn just to love, I would say.
No, well, again, I absolutely agree with you. And one of my, as I say, I wrote a book that mattered, and one of my, the character in Indonesia that was actually based on a dear friend who died of cancer a couple of years ago. The idea, again, this comes from my work around impact investment. The idea came from something I heard around the Philippines, and that was that, the more money the little people spend, the more money someone makes. So if you think about that and take that to its ultimate conclusion, and Anyani, who's this Indonesian character in my book, she's a multi-billionaire mogul. And so that's what she works on. So it's all about, to her, it's all about exploiting, giving people what they want, or giving people what they think they want, as long as they work really hard and as long as they buy the things that her conglomerate manufactures. And if you take that to its ultimate conclusion, in the end, the reason we are forced to take on this paradigm of the 9 to 5 job, your house, your 2.4 kids, your car, all the consumption that we are forced down, that's because actually the storytellers in marketing tell us that's what will make us happy. And if we get enough of these stories in the media, through TV, through our iPhone, through, I've got one, but, through our phones, through all the devices that we have, if we hear enough of these stories, and remember the algorithms as well now, there's such sophisticated algorithms that are pushing all these things across social media all the time, but not just the wider broad picture, oh, get this car, but actually a much more sophisticated way into your brain in order to get you to consume in that way. And that's why, so like Anyani, the people are making money at every stage of consumption, at every stage of storytelling. That's why we're being driven into this way of being. And that's why I think now we absolutely have to embrace, we shouldn't be trying to get back to the new normal. We should really be trying, we should really be trying to investigate what else can be done. And I think this is one of the things, and you were referring earlier about memories and about living in memories. I think memories are incredibly important because they help us set our present. But as you say, I think it's incredibly important also to be able to move forwards and actually use the lessons from our memories to apply to the world at large. And that is oral storytelling, the traditional histories, the really, really, really ancient myths and legends, like, for example, the Ganges and the source drying up being linked to the age of the downfall. Those ancient myths and legends, they're based on people's collective cultural memories. And I think they are what we need as part of to help navigate where we're at. And no one's making any money from that. That's just a way of collaborating and connecting around some of these ancient stories that may help us navigate as we move forwards. So I think that's incredibly important as well.
There's like coming from like a memory perspective, why I hold it and cherish it, because it's something people think about. It's always going to be there. No, it's not. That fades away too. Memories go away. From seeing it firsthand with someone with Alzheimer's, where I've slowly watched the whole memory of me isolating and being gone forever. Uh, it's a powerful thing, and it makes you really want to cherish the moments that you're able to recount and all the fun times and ability to be able to make new memories. This world, if you look anywhere through history, has, I mean, even through old religion text as well, what's the one thing everyone always asks God? Is God, 10, let's use an example, is $10 million. Give me $10 million. I just want $10 million. Just give me $10 million. Does anybody ever take the option of wanting the power to be able to make the $10 million? They want the instant cash, the instant right there transaction. Same thing if you ask somebody right now on the street, I'll give you $10 billion right now if one person, you don't know this person, just one person on the earth is going to die. Most people would accept that cash.
Yeah.
The ability in ourselves to unlock the fact that to be able to say no, because a human life, even if you don't know it, is more important than cash, money, this paper object that we've created that we've learned to fundamentally live our lives on. A lot of people need to have that rationale type thinking. It's not about having an empathy or being sensitive or all these types of things, but it's about a care, an understanding of what a human life is, which you truly never get to experience until you truly analyze it. What I've done in my life, where I've seen as a bit of like age myself when it comes to how a 20-year-old should be thinking, I've started listening to parenting podcasts. I've started listening to every single thing that where I can watch a movie now where a kid dies and then I'll get choked up because I'm trying to rationalize and understand the graphs, not just be like, oh, who gives a crap? Everyone already has this ability. You see it when a dog dies in a film. You're like, I can't believe it just happened. And you start getting emotional. Correlate that same emotion in people. Understand that when someone is pissing you off in a store, or someone's angry or going off this type of thing, from a psychology point of view, I start to look at what happened in their life to get them this angry over this. And once you start doing that, you start realizing this is just a person. He probably has a whole story. You couldn't know he could have just got his car towed. He could have just had this happen. He could have just had someone die. So many times, doing public service or whatever, working at a front desk at a gym, I'll get a phone call where someone would just scream and curse me out. And I'm sitting there thinking of all the things that are going on in my life right now. And if you knew, you wouldn't be talking to me this way. And that's when it restores faith into the aspect of we're people and we do have an intent to care, but it's been neglected and lacked. It's been like this little tiny little monster that's now in the corner now. We're sitting there like, just give me a little bit of food. It's this empathy factor that we need to bring back. And that can only happen when you stop being so, I guess, about yourself. Everywhere now, it's the fame aspect of things. People are trying their best to get ahead, and that means stepping on the throat of somebody else to get ahead. And that's from Wall Street. We've seen that with the stock markets and stuff. Everyone's selling stocks. You're willing to screw somebody's life over with their budget, all the monies they've saved, just so you can get a quick penny. We gotta reverse that. And you said this whole thing where you're starting to see change and it stops. I've talked about it. We're built on a very crappy foundation. We get down to the right where the foundation is. We hit the crack and we're about to crack right through something, but then we start building again. Stop. We need a new structure. We're on really crappy pilings that aren't going to last forever, and we're starting to see that, but then we just rebuild on top of it. Oh, we'll rebuild. We'll rebuild. No, we need to clear the chart. This thing called money, why is it so powerful and so worth more into our lives that a human life isn't? You need to understand that rationale. You need to start thinking in the minds of other people as well as yourself. Bring it to a wholeness. Bring it this connection that you'll find in yourself. I've heard people through meditation and psychedelics understand this whole uncovering of what life really is. Why does it have to take a drug for you to be able to have that ability to understand that about yourself? Why does it have to take some yoga thing for you to be able to do that about yourself? It's not something that's secret. It's just about being a person, this initial thing that is instilled inside of your body to be able to connect. And that's what I get upset about.
Mm.
I I don't like people. I'll be 100% honest with you. I honestly don't like it. But not that I hate people, more like I hate the ones we choose to show. The
Yeah.
ones out in society that are just these empty husks that don't care about anything but what you want, what you want. You know what? I'll sit my dreams on the back burner if it just means if you want to get your way, get your way. I don't care. Because I'm not neglecting my dreams. I'm knowing that I'll get there. It's going to take time, but nobody wants that payoff. Everyone wants the insta cash.
But I do again, Rob. I knew I would enjoy this conversation, and I truly am. But you've got to remember why they want the instant cash. We've been told, for generations, it's been the cash, it's been money which has dictated the structure of our society, and the more readily available and the more aware we are of what money can buy, which of course our multimedia and the invasive nature of the digital world now. It is, if we're schooled that is the be all and end all, well then we're not really going to know any different. And I think part of that, you've talked about empathy a few times. I mean, for me, that bond, that initial story I told you, Lucy Horse, my daughter is called Lucy and my horse is called Lucy, so Lucy Horse is Lucy Horse. That bond I have with Lucy, that is just tremendous. It's a spiritual, it's a bond. I feel plugged in when I'm riding her and when I'm with her. That's not manufactured empathy. That's part of what makes me whole. And the manufactured empathy, you were talking earlier about self-care, all of this stuff, everything, linked to anywhere anyone can make money, be it through self-care or get this meditation app, or be it through, or go away on a cruise, get away from it all of this, every single aspect of our lives is monetized, and that includes empathy. And we're scared of moving away from this world, even though it's become almost unlivable in natural terms, and also unlivable in human terms. It's become almost unlivable. And yet we're so busily building, I always think of it as Frankenstein's monster, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and, pulling together all the body parts and trying to kind of animate it. And that's what we're doing. We're keeping on trying to animate this monster. And whereas instead we should actually just have the courage to say, we can't do this anymore. And, and I'm very much hoping that if we get our voices together, because I'm really not anti the digital world. I think the digital world is a wonderful thing, but we just need to harness its energy and its power in the same way as hopefully we've harnessed some of the spiritual world as well. And, I think there's tremendous work that can be done around actually having similar conversations, where algorithms are set to detect, looking for porn, looking for this, looking for gambling. We can actually create good, positive watchwords. I've got in my book, I've got a safe space, which is based on a website I set up, the idea of a storytelling website, and the Good News app, which is kind of an aggregator, a news aggregator around good news. Some of these things are already happening. And I really do think that if we just say collectively, and I do think the voices are getting stronger, that this is not actually the world we want to live in at the moment. And we cannot keep on like this. And people have been saying that for a while, but I think those voices are now getting louder. And I derive tremendous comfort from that. And it comes back to storytelling. I do want to dip back to something that you said earlier, because it really made me think, this kind of idea of stuff being manufactured. In the Western world, we build big buildings to say, this is who we are. This is, I mean, look at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, for example. Or, when I was in Atlanta, it's CNN is in Atlanta, isn't it? So, or Coca-Cola, I'm not saying that's hugely historic in the wider global sense, but, it's incredibly important in terms of Atlanta and the global brand. So, we build big things. And I found when the first time I was in Canada, I was actually there on a conference, and but it was shortly after, or it was the first time I'd been since I found out that my grandfather had been Ojibwe First Nation. And I went to a museum of anthropology in Vancouver, and I realized that what the First Nation people do, and what quite a lot of ancient peoples do, they don't actually build big buildings. Their stories are their culture. That's their record of who they are and what they are, and the nature of what they believe in. Nothing is built to last. Some of the oldest totem poles are only 120 years old. Some of the longhouses. It's not about lasting as building in this world. It's not. For them, it's the legends and the tales and the cultures that underpin that cultural history. And that, and I think the other thing that fascinates me about that is the fact that the African drumming, the African legends, and I'll if you're interested, I'll talk about that in a minute. But that idea of the transitory nature of things, that actually ideas and concepts and the memory of a culture being so much more important than that mattering more. And if you set that against where we're at the moment and the worth, the worth of a soul, what is the worth of a soul? I think some of the ancient cultures can teach us that. There's so much to teach there, as long as we're willing to listen. But at the moment, we're not willing to listen because there's so much coming at us from everywhere that we just don't have the headspace.
It's
We
funny.
need to be more selective.
I usually quote Joe Rogan, but I will say one thing that is a good example of what you kind of just said, these things that weren't built to last. He has a saying that he wrote on his blog that someone kind of put it on like a poster, and it was that people are like sandcastles, spending so much time to be built up, only to know that the inevitable end to be washed back down. It's paraphrasing a little bit of his quote, but it's that concept of, we work as hard as we can thinking that it's not going to last, thinking that if you don't do it now, it's never going to happen. That is a good mindset to have, but the aspect of, you have a lot more time than you think.
Yeah.
Fame doesn't need to be done in the corrupt way, doesn't need to be done in the wrong way, doesn't need the money, all these types of things that we choose to get in the wrong way. It can be done, but it's going to take time. Nothing is instant.
No, absolutely. And this is what we learn. I grasped, the Zoroastrianism, which is, that's the oldest monotheistic religion in the world. So one God, this idea of one God as opposed to many gods. You're talking 3,000-4,000 years ago, and yet some of the legends are still as relevant today. The idea that the title of Mother of Floods, this idea of being flooded by the digital world and needing to build some kind of ark, and at the same time, these ancient legends of actually inundations, of physical floods. The story of Yumi and the snowman in Zoroastrianism, that's all about, this flood. It was snow, but that smothered the earth. And then Yumi went out spreading seeds. The earth as he knew it, was gone, but he had the seed to re-sow and to replant. And I think that, I think that idea is just such an important one, because actually that seed is within all of us, and that seed to move away from what is, and those that the idea that everything is now, everything is immediate, to actually thinking about the real value. I mean, Oscar Wilde said, the value, he knows the value of everything and the worth of nothing. That's us at the moment. And I think if we dare to just be quiet, just take time, just for a minute, and hear that heartbeat of the world and mirrored to our own, that will give us a chance to listen to some of the older stuff. Humanity's done stuff before, and it's happened over and over again in different ways. And I think by understanding and contextualizing the world, not just in, you know, when we're gonna get our next paycheck, or, you know, where we're going to go on holiday next, or, you know, what else we're going to buy next, but actually if we see the really, really long-term vision of what humanity could be, I think that's a really powerful vision of hope, even in what are really very dystopian times.
That heartbeat is a lot louder than you think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I couldn't think of a better thing to end on. Please promote the book. Let everybody know where we can find it, where they can purchase it. I'll make sure to link it in the description as well. And thank you for giving me your time today, too.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Rob. I've so enjoyed it. As I say, I was very lucky that Crow's Nest saw my writing and let me actually publish the book that I wanted to write. You know, there's nothing wrong with romances or crimes or thrillers, you know, where, hey, that's wonderful. But I wanted to write something that had the power to be a blueprint for us all to follow. And I'm very, very grateful that I've been able to do that. It's available in the UK on Waterstones. In the US, I think it's in Book Depository, Walmart, so online, and I would imagine in some stores. So I think it's being featured in quite major places. But because of lockdown, obviously Amazon may still be the best way to purchase, and at the moment it's on particularly special offer, the paperback, and I hear you where paperbacks are concerned. So, and you might want to read some of the reviews as well on Goodreads. But basically I would love for people to engage with it, to engage with some of the ideas, because I believe in the power we all have to come together and make change happen. And I'm so grateful that you've given me the opportunity to talk about some of the things that matter to me, because they obviously matter very deeply to you. And I think by having these kind of conversations, you know, we can make a difference. And I'd love to hear from people what they think about A Mother of Floods. You can get hold of me on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Madeleine F. White. And as I say, Mother of Floods is an Amazon and other good bookshops in the US, Canada, and the UK.
I'll make sure to link everything in the description too. And thank you for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank podcast.